If you had told me a few months ago that I'd hire security for my own wedding just to keep my parents and my brother out, I would have laughed. I would have said, they're difficult, sure, but they're still my family. They wouldn't actually try to crash my wedding. But they did. On the day I married the love of my life, I watched, from a second-floor window of a beautiful garden venue, as security escorted my parents and my younger brother Mike back through the iron gates. My mom was crying. My dad was red with anger, and Mike was arguing with the guards like he had every right to be there. He didn't, none of them did, because I never invited them. I'm Sarah, 30 years old, and I made the decision that shocked my entire family. I refused to invite my golden child, younger brother, and the parents who raised us to my wedding. Not out of spite, not because of a petty argument, but because I finally chose myself over a lifetime of being second place in my own home. My brother Mike, 27, grew up as the sun around which my parents' entire universe orbited. I was just orbiting him. I was the babysitter, the backup plan, the built-in ATM, the one they told to understand and be the bigger person every single time he crossed a line. They didn't see it that way, of course. In their version of the story, I'm the cold, ungrateful daughter who changed after college, the one who abandoned her family, who thinks she's better than everyone, and who is now so full of herself that she didn't even invite her own parents to her wedding. In their version, Mike is the wounded little brother whose heart I shattered by not letting him stand next to me at the altar as my best man, a role he invented for himself and loudly told everyone he'd already secured, despite the fact that we barely speak. In my version, this story starts long before the wedding, long before the security guards and the slammed car doors. It starts with a little girl who used to be loved, and the day that love was quietly redirected to the baby boy placed in her arms. It winds through birthdays where the wrong child got the gift, paychecks split in half for fairness, savings stolen to buy a gaming console, and a camera I never got to hold. It moves through years of being dismissed, gaslit, and told that what I felt wasn't real, that I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too jealous of my brother. It leads to the moment when the man I love, Jake, got down on one knee and asked me to marry him, and the dread that washed over me almost as strongly as the joy. Because I knew my family would not just be guests at my wedding, they would try to own it. And eventually, it lands in a quiet cafe where my brother confessed something that changed everything I thought I knew about our past, and at a garden gate where my parents finally learned what it looks like when their daughter's boundaries are real. This is the story of how I got from being the forgotten child in the background of every family photo to the woman who chose to walk down the aisle without the people who raised her, and why, even now, with a ring on my finger and a new last name, I still wake up some nights replaying the question, am I cruel for shutting them out? Or was this the first time in my life I was truly kind to myself? If I close my eyes, I can still remember the version of my childhood where everything felt warm. Back then, before Mike was born, I was the center of my parents' world. My dad used to hoist me onto his shoulders during weekend trips to the park. My mom would braid my hair every morning, humming softly while I swung my legs from the kitchen chair. They read me bedtime stories, saved every finger painting I made, and told anyone who would listen how bright and creative their daughter was. I wasn't special, just loved. And for a little girl, that was more than enough. But love can shift in silence, and no one tells you when it's happening. Mike was born when I was 3. I don't remember the exact moment things changed. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no sudden neglect. It was slow, like the dimming of a light bulb you don't notice until the room is almost dark. My parents adored him from the moment he arrived. That part wasn't the problem. The problem was, they adored him instead of me. As Mike grew, so did the imbalance. Suddenly their smiles, their attention, their softness, it was all reserved for him. I got what was left over. Sometimes that meant nothing at all. By the time I was 10, the favoritism wasn't subtle anymore. I had spent months begging for a bike for my birthday. I'd circle models in magazines, leave the pages neatly on the kitchen counter, even bring it up during dinner. I thought I'd made myself clear. On my birthday, I unwrapped a stack of clothes and a book series I'd never heard of. I smiled politely. I said thank you. But inside, something small cracked. 2 weeks later, Mike, 7 years old and not even asking, rolled out of the garage on a shiny, new red bike, our parents cheering and clapping like he had won the Tour de France. When I asked why he got one and I didn't, My dad barely looked up. Mike needs more exercise. You're fine without one. That was the first time I realized I wasn't allowed to want anything for myself. But it wasn't the last. Middle school brought straight A report cards, honor rolls, and my parents glancing at them like they were receipts from the grocery store. Meanwhile, when Mike got a B+ on a single test, they announced a dinner celebration like he'd achieved something monumental. I spent years trying to earn what he received simply for existing. At 16, desperate for independence, I got my first part-time job at a bookstore. It smelled like old paper and vanilla candles, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud of something that was fully mine. I started saving every dollar for college. Mike, 13, didn't like that. He complained to my parents that it was unfair I had money and he didn't. Instead of teaching him responsibility, they demanded I give him half my paycheck every month. Half. When I protested, they threatened to make me quit the job entirely. So I handed over the money, watching him spend it on junk food and video games while I counted coins for gas. Every boundary I set was treated as a personal attack against my brother. In high school, he borrowed everything, my clothes, my electronics, even my car once I got my license. And every time I confronted him, my parents lectured me. He's your brother. You should share. Why are you always so selfish? You know Mike has a sensitive temperament. Just let it go. Sensitive temperament. What a convenient phrase. College became my escape route. When I got accepted to my dream university with a partial scholarship, I ran home thrilled. My parents responded with, "That's nice, honey," and immediately changed the subject to Mike's football game. Years later, when he was accepted into a community college, they threw a party with catering and a live band. That comparison lives in a permanent file inside my chest. During sophomore year of college, the breaking point came when I saved for months for a photography camera. My way of coping, my passion, the one thing that made me feel seen. I came home for winter break to find my savings missing. Mike had stolen it. He bought a gaming console with the money I'd earned through exhaustion, sacrifice, and hope. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "Just save up again." My parents didn't make him return it. They didn't make him pay me back. They simply said, "Well, you should have hidden your money better." That was the first time I saw my family clearly, not as parents and a brother, but as people who believed I existed to fill the gaps in their wants. After that, I visited less. I worked more. I supported myself through college while they joked that I'd changed. Then at 25, I met Jake. Jake, who listened when I spoke, who didn't take without asking, who didn't treat my accomplishments like background noise. Jake's family welcomed me from the first day, showing me what a healthy family actually looks like: kindness without conditions, affection without competition. 5 years later, he proposed during a quiet weekend getaway. Kneeling under string lights, he hung himself, hands slightly trembling because he wanted everything to be perfect for me. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. And yet, even as he slid the ring onto my finger, even as he whispered, "Say yes," through a breathless smile, a single cold thought lodged itself in the back of my mind. What am I going to do about my family? Because deep down, in a place I hated to admit existed, I already knew inviting them would ruin everything. If there's one thing people misunderstand about toxic families, it's that the conflict never begins with something big. It starts with tiny fractures, hairline cracks you're told to ignore. And I ignored them for years. After Jake proposed, we spent the first few weeks wrapped in a kind of glowing bliss. We toured venues, tasted cakes, debated color palettes and playlists. I felt light in a way I hadn't since childhood. Like the universe had finally handed me something I didn't have to fight to keep. Then the first crack appeared. It came in the form of a phone call from my mother. At first, she sounded thrilled, too thrilled. Her voice was sugary, rehearsed, each word chosen like she was performing motherhood rather than living it. "Sarah, sweetheart, we heard the news. Jake finally proposed, didn't he? Oh, we're so excited for you." I froze for half a second, caught off guard by their sudden enthusiasm. They hadn't been part of my life in any meaningful way for years. I hadn't shared holidays with them. Mike didn't even have my phone number. He'd always used my parents as messengers. But like always, my mother steamrolled the silence. "Now we need to talk about the engagement party. Obviously, we'll host. The guest list will be a little tricky, but we've already thought about where we could do it." Jake looked at me from across the room, eyebrows raised. I swallowed hard. "Mom, we're not planning an engagement party." There was a full second of stunned silence. "What do you mean you're not having one? Sarah, that's ridiculous. Traditions matter." She didn't say your traditions. She meant hers. Soon came the second crack. 2 days later, my father called. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't even ask how I was doing. He simply said, "Your brother is very hurt that you didn't tell him personally about the engagement." Mike, hurt. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. "Dad, we don't talk." Well, whose fault is that? I stared at the phone in disbelief, heat rising behind my eyes. "I don't owe Mike anything. We're not close." "That's because you keep pushing him away." There it was, the old script, the familiar gaslighting. I hung up feeling drained, a shadow stretching across the joy I'd felt since Jake proposed. And then, Mike himself broke the uneasy quiet. He sent me a barrage of texts so out of line, I had to read them twice just to make sure they were real. Mike, Mom says you're not having an engagement party. That better be a joke. Mike, also, I already told people I'm your best man, so let me know what weekend works for the bachelor party. Mike, seriously, Sarah, don't embarrass me. Embarrass him? I showed the messages to Jake, who let out a shocked laugh. He thinks he's the best man? Jake asked. He decided he is, I muttered. My parents let him rewrite reality his whole life. Jake placed a hand over mine, gentle but sure. Then we hold the line, our wedding, our rules. But holding the line wasn't easy, because every day something else poked at the wound. A passive-aggressive comment from my mom about family unity. A guilt-laced voicemail from my dad about tradition. Texts from Mike complaining that I wasn't involving him enough. They acted like the years of theft, manipulation, gaslighting, favoritism, and emotional erasure had evaporated the moment I got engaged. Like they were entitled to celebrate a daughter they never made space for. Meanwhile, I noticed something unsettling in myself. My heartbeat spiked whenever an unknown number called. My shoulders tensed whenever I opened the mailbox. I began checking over my shoulder when Jake and I toured venues. The anxiety wasn't imaginary. It was rooted in every past experience where I'd been forced to endure their treatment quietly, told to understand, told to stop overreacting. One night, Jake and I sat on the couch, planning the seating chart. I hesitated, pen hovering over the page. The table meant for family. "Jake," I whispered, what if I don't invite them? Any of them. Not my parents, not Mike." He didn't look shocked. He didn't look disappointed. He simply looked at me. Really looked. "Sarah, this is your wedding. If you don't feel safe, they don't get to be there." My throat tightened, emotion pushing upward like a wave. Because for the first time in my life, someone wasn't telling me to swallow my feelings. Someone wasn't telling me to be reasonable. Someone wasn't telling me to bend. He was telling me I mattered. But the conflict seed was already planted. My mother sensed distance like sharks sense blood in the water. My father heard boundaries and interpreted them as betrayal. And Mike saw my wedding as another stage on which to perform. Their behavior grew stranger, their messages more invasive, their tone more demanding. And beneath it all, I felt something familiar simmering, a storm I had spent years outrunning. I didn't know it yet, but the moment I decided to draw a boundary, they decided to wage a war. The moment everything truly snapped didn't come as a screaming fight or a dramatic confrontation. It arrived quietly, just a phone call and a single sentence that made my entire childhood replay in my head with brutal clarity. It was a Thursday evening. Jake was cooking dinner, humming off key to a playlist he insisted was perfect background music. I was on the couch, scrolling through floral arrangements, trying to make myself focus on something beautiful instead of the gnawing pressure building around the wedding. Then my phone rang. Mom. Jake looked over his shoulder. "Do you want me to answer it?" he whispered, half joking, half serious. I shook my head, took a breath, and picked up. Her voice was shaky, dramatically shaky, the way it always was before she launched into a monologue. "Sarah, why haven't we received our wedding invitations yet?" My heart thudded, a single heavy beat. I had been putting it off, hoping that somehow the universe would deliver the message for me. But of course, it hadn't. I swallowed, feeling the air turn thick in my lungs. "Mom, you're not invited." Silence. A long, terrible silence. Then, "What do you mean we're not invited? Are you out of your mind?" Her voice was sharp now, the theatrics gone. I forced myself to stay steady. "I don't feel comfortable having you, Dad, or Mike at the wedding. Our history, the way things have been for years, I don't want that energy there." She gasped like I had stabbed her. "Energy? Energy! We are your parents, Sarah, and Mike is your brother. This is family. You don't get to erase us." I could feel my pulse climbing, my palms damp, the old familiar panic creeping in. Mom, I'm not erasing anyone, but I'm choosing peace, and my wedding day is supposed to be peaceful. She didn't even acknowledge the words. Do you have any idea, she cried, how humiliated I will be? What will people think when they hear we weren't invited? Do you even care what this does to us? There it was, her real concern. Not my happiness, not my safety, not my emotional well-being. Her reputation. Before I could respond, I heard shuffling, then a deeper voice cut in, my father. Sarah, enough of this nonsense. You're breaking Mike's heart. I closed my eyes, letting my head fall back against the couch. Dad, Mike and I barely speak. That's because you don't try, he snapped. He's been telling everyone he's going to be your best man, and you're just going to embarrass him like this? My grip on the phone tightened. I never asked him to be my best man. He made that up. He is your only sibling. Who else would it be? His voice dripped with accusation like I was betraying some sacred law. It was surreal, hearing them speak with such certainty, as if the years of pain and favoritism didn't exist. As if all the ugly moments, the stolen money, the broken belongings, the lectures about sharing, the dismissal of every achievement, were figments of my imagination. I breathed slowly, grounding myself. My decision is final. That sentence was my match in a dry forest. My father exploded. If you shut us out of this wedding, don't expect a dime from us ever again. You'll be written out of the will. Do you understand me? Jake froze mid-stir at the stove, turning his head toward me. He didn't speak, but his eyes sharpened with concern. My parents thought they were dropping a bomb. They didn't know the ruins they threatened to leave me in were places I had already walked through alone. I no longer wanted or expected anything from them. Not money, not inheritance, not approval. I spoke quietly. Okay. Another silence. A stunned one this time. What did you say? My dad demanded. I said okay. He spluttered, caught off guard. My mother gasped. It was the first time in my life I had not bent. Then came the last voice I expected to hear, loud, entitled, full of the same tone he'd used our whole childhood. Mike. He grabbed the phone from one of them. Wow, he started, dripping sarcasm. So now you think you're too good for the family? That it? My jaw clenched. Mike, this isn't about thinking I'm too good. It's about boundaries. He laughed, actually laughed. Boundaries? You're so dramatic. You're jealous, Sarah. You always have been. Jealous. A word that had been used to silence me since I was 10. My brother kept going, voice rising. You're jealous because I'm the one they care about. You can't stand not being the center of attention at your own stupid wedding. Something in me cracked. Not in the way it had when I was a child. Quietly, invisibly. No. This crack was loud, deep, final. Mike, I said with ice-calm precision, you're not coming. None of you are. He scoffed, snarling. You'll regret this. And then he hung up. The line went dead. My hands trembled. My throat tightened. My vision blurred. But I didn't cry. I just sat there, phone in my lap, staring at the wall as the truth settled in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a temporary fight. This was the moment my family made it clear. They valued the idea of obedience more than the reality of me. Jake knelt next to the couch, cupping my face gently. You did the right thing, he murmured. I'm here. I've got you. And for the first time in my life, leaning into someone didn't feel weak. It felt like survival. In the hours after the phone call, the world felt strangely muted, like someone had pressed a palm over my ears. Jake sat beside me on the couch, his hand warm on my knee, but even that warmth felt distant, like I was underwater and everything above the surface was happening too fast for me to catch. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was something heavier, something that settled in my bones. Confirmation, a final proof of something I'd spent years trying not to believe. My family didn't love me. They needed me. They expected from me. But love, the unconditional kind, had never been part of the equation. Jake didn't push me to talk. He never did. He simply gave me space, checking on me with small gestures, refilling my water, brushing a stray curl from my face, sitting close enough for me to feel him, but not close enough to overwhelm me. Eventually, he spoke quietly. What's going through your head right now? I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I keep thinking, what if I really am the problem? My voice came out softer than I intended, shaky at the edges. What if they're right? What if I'm overreacting, cutting off your whole family from your wedding? Who does that? Jake shook his head immediately. Someone who's been hurt for years. Someone who's finally drawing a line. I closed my eyes. Inside, I could hear the distorted chorus of my childhood. Be nice to Mike. Why do you always make things so difficult? Stop being jealous. He needs it more. Don't ruin the mood. I had internalized those messages so deeply that even now, even after all the cruelty, my first instinct was to blame myself. I rubbed my palms against my jeans, grounding myself. I shouldn't be second-guessing. I know everything they've done. The favoritism, the stealing, the threats, all of it. But every time I push back, I hear their voices in my head, telling me I'm selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. Jake took my hands gently, lightly squeezing until I finally looked up at him. Sarah, you've spent your whole life being told your feelings don't matter. You can't flip a switch and undo that overnight. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. Something inside me strained, like a door I'd kept shut was cracking open. Still, doubt clawed its way back in. What if I regret this? What if 10 years from now I look back and think I should have tried harder? Jake's voice softened even more. Then let me ask you something. If you invited them, would you feel safe? Would you feel loved? Would you feel supported on the biggest day of your life? I didn't even have to think. No. The answer came out like a truth I'd been avoiding for decades. A tear slipped down my cheek. I hadn't even noticed it forming. Jake reached up, wiping it away with the pad of his thumb. Then that's your answer. I nodded, but the ache inside me didn't disappear. It just shifted from self-blame to grief. Because what I was mourning wasn't losing my family. I lost them a long time ago. I was mourning the fantasy of what I always wished they were. Later that night, after I'd calmed enough to think clearly, I opened my messages. I didn't want to, but ignoring the noise would only make the anxiety worse. My phone screen was flooded. 27 missed texts from Mike, 4 voicemails from my mom, 2 from my dad. I opened the most recent text from Mike. You think you're so great? Guess what, Sarah? You're nothing without us. Another one. If you think Jake is going to put up with your crap forever, you're delusional. The words stung less than I expected, probably because I'd heard variations of them my whole life. Still, something inside me hardened. No more letting him decide who I was, no more shrinking so he could feel big. I typed a single message back. Do not contact me again. I blocked his number before I could question myself. My heart pounded, fast, uneven, almost painful. But beneath the fear was something else. Relief. It was small, fragile, but real. A quiet seed of self-worth. My parents' voicemails were exactly what I expected. My mom's voice was raw and theatrical. You're tearing this family apart. If you think you'll be happy without us there, you're mistaken. My father's was clipped, angry. Your brother is devastated. You need to apologize. This behavior is unacceptable for a daughter. A daughter, not a person, not a woman, a role, a responsibility. One I had been failing in their eyes since the day Mike was born. I deleted the messages. That night, Jake held me as I lay curled against his chest. I didn't cry. I wasn't numb. I was just processing. Trying to rebuild the version of myself that wasn't crafted by their voices. Eventually, in a whisper I barely heard myself, I said, I'm scared. His hand brushed slowly through my hair. I know, but you're not alone anymore. The words settled into me like a quiet anchor. For the first time in my life, someone wasn't just comforting me. They were choosing to stay. They were choosing me. And that was the moment I realized. This conflict wasn't just about a wedding. It was about reclaiming the life I was allowed to have. In the days that followed, the tension didn't calm. It metastasized. My decision not to invite my parents and Mike didn't create a boundary. It set off an alarm in my family system, and every single one of them went into full crisis mode. Not because they loved me or were hurt, but because control was slipping out of their hands. And in my family, loss of control was treated like an emergency. It started with the extended family. At first, my phone buzzed occasionally with unknown numbers, voicemails from relatives I barely spoke to. Honey, your mother is devastated. Just apologize so everything can go back to normal. Normal. As if normal hadn't been decades of being overlooked, blamed, and mined for resources. Another message came from an aunt I used to adore. Your father is heartbroken. He said you've become cold. Is Jake influencing you? Even now, even with all the context in the world, they framed my autonomy as corruption, because in their minds, I wasn't supposed to have it. Jake's family saw the shift in me before I did. I'd sit at dinner with them and smile, but the muscles in my shoulders would stay tense. I'd try to join conversations, but my focus kept drifting back to my phone, waiting for the next attack to hit. One evening, Jake's mom placed her hand gently over mine. Sweetheart, she said softly, you're allowed to enjoy being engaged. You don't need their permission. Her kindness nearly broke me. The contrast between her warmth and my own mother's emotional theatrics felt like stepping from winter into spring and realizing how cold I'd been all my life. Then the escalation reached a whole new level. My parents upped the pressure. It began with my mom leaving long, crying voicemails, each sounding more desperate than the last. I already bought a dress, Sarah. How could you embarrass me like this? Do you want people thinking we abused you? Do you want to destroy our reputation? Mike has been crying for days. He loves you so much. The more she spoke, the more her logic tangled into itself until I couldn't tell whether she was mourning a daughter or mourning the image she'd constructed for the world. My dad, on the other hand, shifted tactics. His messages became more transactional, colder. I can pay for the entire wedding if that's what's stopping you. If you change your mind by Friday, I'll include Jake's parents in the rehearsal dinner plans. Don't throw away your inheritance over something petty. I stared at the screen after reading that one, a bitter taste rising in my throat. It felt like they thought my wedding was something they could buy, like an item in their household, something that existed for them to control, decorate, and display. Not a moment in my life that actually belonged to me. But the worst escalation came from Mike. His initial angry text had stopped after I blocked him. But toxic people rarely stop when blocked. They just change the route. 2 days after the call, Jake found me standing frozen in the kitchen, staring at an email on my laptop. It was from Mike. The subject line read, "You owe me an explanation." I clicked it. It started like a journal entry, rambling, contradictory, dripping with self-pity. "I've been thinking a lot since you blocked me. I know I wasn't the best brother, but you weren't perfect either." Already deflecting. "You always acted better than everyone. You always made me feel like less. So yeah, I took your camera money. Yeah, I broke your camera on purpose." My breath caught. Not because of the confession, I'd already suspected it, but because he admitted it casually, like it was ancient history, rather than the moment my trust and family dissolved. I was jealous. You got into your dream college. I didn't. I felt like Mom and Dad loved you more. I let out a strangled laugh. He truly believed he was the neglected one. "I'm willing to let everything go if you just put me back on the guest list." I stared at the words, reading them twice. He wasn't apologizing. He was bargaining. Jake read over my shoulder, his jaw tightening. "He thinks this is a negotiation," he muttered. "It wasn't. It never was." I replied with a short message. "Thank you for the honesty, but my decision is final. I need space." I blocked him on email, but Mike wasn't done. 3 days later, my wedding venue coordinator called me, her tone uneasy. "Hi, Sarah. Sorry to bother you, but I just got a call from someone claiming to be your fiancé. He asked me to add 3 names to the guest list." My stomach dropped. She continued. "He didn't sound like Jake, so I checked with him, and he said he didn't call. That's when I thought something might be wrong." I felt heat rise up my neck. "What names?" I whispered, though I already knew. Her voice softened. "Your parents and your brother." My grip on the phone tightened. Mike had pretended to be Jake, to force his way into a wedding he was never invited to. He had crossed from manipulation into identity deception without a second thought. Jake found me standing frozen again, phone still to my ear, shock rippling through me. He reached out, gently lowering my hand. "Sarah, this isn't a family misunderstanding anymore. This is harassment." His voice wasn't angry or panicked. It was protective in a way that hit me straight in the chest. That night, Jake brought up something neither of us thought we'd ever say out loud. "We might need to get a restraining order." My breath hitched. Even with all the pain they caused, even with every boundary they bulldozed, I had never imagined legal action. Doing that meant admitting something final, that my family was no longer safe for me. And that truth cut deeper than anything they'd said. The escalation didn't stop there. Extended relatives began messaging Jake directly. Some shamed him, accusing him of turning me against my family. Others begged him to fix things before the wedding. My parents began calling Jake's parents, trying to guilt them, trying to convince them that I was emotionally unstable. Jake's parents immediately told us about every call. Their loyalty didn't waver for a second. Jake's mother even said, "Sweetheart, if they keep this up, we will get a restraining order." For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not guilt, but a small spark of strength. Because I wasn't fighting alone anymore. And that terrified my family more than anything. As the pressure intensified, something unexpected happened. I started to change. I stopped trembling when my phone buzzed. I stopped checking over my shoulder. I stopped explaining myself. One evening, Jake found me standing by our bedroom window, staring out at the street below. He slipped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You okay?" he murmured. I nodded slowly. But the truth was deeper. I was growing, out of them, out of the roles they forced me into, out of the version of Sarah who never fought back. And each step forward made it clearer. The storm wasn't over. It was building toward something much larger. A confrontation that would finally reveal everything my family had spent decades hiding behind denial and favoritism. And the moment it broke, nothing would be the same again. There comes a point in every storm when the sky doesn't just darken, it collapses. For me, that moment didn't happen during a phone call or an argument. It didn't even happen during one of Mike's manipulative messages. It happened in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, at work, with fluorescent office lights humming softly above me and coworkers chatting casually in the hallway. The world was normal, but inside me, something broke. I was in a meeting when my colleague quietly slipped in and whispered, "Sarah, there's a woman in the lobby asking for you. She's crying, loudly." My stomach twisted. I already knew. I walked out of the conference room and down the hallway, my heels clicking sharp against the tile. With each step, the air felt heavier, thicker, like the world was pushing me back, trying to warn me. But I kept walking, and then I saw her. My mother, standing in the middle of the lobby, sobbing theatrically while clutching a large white bag stuffed with old photo albums. People were staring, employees, visitors, even the security guard near the door. She looked like a grieving widow who had lost her life's purpose. But she wasn't grieving me. She was grieving her image. "Sarah," she cried, rushing toward me. "Sweetheart, please, please reconsider. I already bought a dress. Your father picked out a tie. Mike has been practicing a speech. You can't do this to us." My face flushed hot with humiliation. A few coworkers paused nearby, pretending not to listen. I lowered my voice sharply. "Mom, you can't show up here." She didn't even hear me, or she didn't want to. She dug into the bag and pulled out photo albums, flipping them open on the lobby coffee table with trembling hands. "Look, Sarah, look at these pictures of us. Look how happy we were. You were such a beautiful child. We loved you so much. How did you become like this?" Each word chipped at the fragile self-control I'd been holding on to for weeks. She opened another album. My baby pictures, my drawings taped to the fridge, Mike as a toddler in my lap. She was weaponizing nostalgia, using memories like chains. My voice shook. "Mom, stop. This is inappropriate." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and she grabbed my wrist, too tightly. "If you go through with this wedding without us, I will never forgive you, ever." The pressure on my wrist dug into the bone. It hurt, but what hurt more was the truth in her words. There was no love in them, just possession. The security guard took a step forward, but I shook my head slightly. I wasn't ready for witnesses to the collapse happening inside me. With a breath that trembled through my whole chest, I gently pulled my arm free. "If you don't leave right now, I'll have to call security." Her expression shifted instantly, from sorrow to fury. "How dare you threaten your own mother, after everything we've done for you?" Everything they'd done. The phrase sliced deeper than she knew. A coworker walking by paused, clearly able to hear everything. Mortification flooded me like heat rising from the floor. I felt myself shrinking, not physically, but emotionally, folding inward the way I always had when my parents were disappointed. I felt 10 years old again, small, wrong, broken. My mom's voice wavered. "I raised you. I sacrificed everything. And now you're throwing us away for some man?" Something snapped. Not loudly, not violently. Quietly, like a rope breaking under years of weight. I straightened. "I'm not throwing you away," I whispered, voice barely holding. "I'm protecting myself." The silence that followed was suffocating. She stared at me, genuinely shocked, as if the idea that I deserved protection was foreign. Then she picked up the photo albums, shoved them back into the bag, and rushed past me, crying loudly enough to draw more stares. I stood rooted to the ground, hands trembling. When she disappeared through the building doors, my legs finally gave out. I sat on a lobby bench, breathing shallowly, vision blurring around the edges. And then the tears came. Silent, violent, uncontrollable. I buried my face in my hands, the weight of everything crashing onto me at once. The phone calls, the threats, the manipulation, the guilt, the relentless expectation to be the villain in their story. The crushing realization that no matter what I did, I would always be the wrong child. I didn't cry because I felt guilty. I didn't cry because I doubted my choices. I cried because I finally understood. They would never choose me. Not over Mike, not over their image, not even over their pride. And there was nothing I could do to change that. By the time Jake arrived, having left work early when he heard the tremor in my voice, I was sitting outside the building on a concrete planter, knees pulled to my chest. He rushed to me and knelt down. Sarah, his voice cracked. God, sweetheart, what happened? Talk to me. I couldn't form words. I could barely breathe. He pulled me into his arms, cradling my shaking body against him as if he could hold the pieces together by sheer force of will. People walked past. Cars honked in the distance. The world continued as if mine hadn't just collapsed. But in that moment, with my face pressed into Jake's chest and his hand protective on the back of my head, something inside me shifted. I realized I had finally hit bottom. Not the kind of bottom where you lose hope. The kind where you stop clinging to fantasies. The kind where you finally see the truth clearly. My family didn't break me on accident. They broke me because it kept me manageable. And now that I was refusing to be manageable, they were willing to destroy everything to drag me back. That night, lying on the couch with a warm blanket over me and Jake holding me as if I might disappear, I whispered the most painful truth of all. I don't think they ever loved me. Jake kissed my forehead, his voice soft but steady. Then let me love you the way you deserve from the beginning. And for the first time in my entire life, I let someone say that without doubting it. But the darkest moment has a purpose. It clears the ground. And in its aftermath, something new was ready to grow. Something powerful. Something mine. The shift didn't happen all at once. It wasn't cinematic or dramatic. It happened slowly, like sunrise creeping over a horizon you didn't realize you'd been staring at. After that breakdown at work, something inside me rearranged itself. Not instantly, not cleanly, but enough for me to feel a new kind of strength waking up. Quiet, steady, grounded. Jake noticed it before I did. He'd catch me staring at my phone, not with fear, but with a kind of exhausted clarity. He'd see me open a message, not to panic, but to delete it calmly. He'd watch me breathe through the anxiety instead of drowning in it. One night, about a week after my mom's workplace ambush, he sat beside me on the edge of our bed. "You're different," he whispered. "Stronger. Even after everything, you're standing taller." I tilted my head back against the headboard. "Or maybe," I said softly, "I finally stopped shrinking." The turning point truly began with a conversation neither of us expected. We met my parents and Mike in person. It wasn't my idea. God, it wasn't my idea. Jake suggested it gently, saying, "Not to reconcile, not to cave, but maybe it'll give you closure." Closure. The word tasted foreign. Impossible. But a part of me wanted to see, really see, whether there was anything left to salvage. So we agreed to meet at a quiet cafe in a neighboring town, neutral territory where no one could storm my workplace, no one could make a scene, and I could leave if things went south. When Jake and I walked in, my parents and Mike were already seated. My mom looked like she'd cried for hours. My dad's jaw was tight, defensive. Mike, surprisingly subdued, hands clasped, eyes darting nervously. For a moment, I almost believed things might go differently. I was wrong. My mom started first, loud, dramatic, emotional. "Sarah, you're tearing the family apart. You're acting out, and we don't understand why. You used to be such a sweet girl." Jake placed his hand over mine under the table. I felt the warmth of it steady me. My father cut in, tone stinging. "You embarrassed your brother. You embarrassed your mother. You've made something as simple as a wedding into a battlefield." A battlefield, as if they hadn't launched every attack. I opened my mouth, but Mike spoke before I could. "Look," he said quietly, "I know I wasn't a great brother growing up. I know I messed up, but I want us to fix things." I blinked. My breath hitched. This was new. Then he continued. I need to tell you something." His voice trembled, not with guilt, but with fear of saying something he'd kept buried. "That camera you thought I broke on accident back in college. I did it on purpose." My mother gasped. My father stiffened. But Mike didn't stop. "I was jealous," he admitted. "You got into that fancy school. You were always the smart one. I felt like I couldn't catch up. I wanted to bring you down a little, make things even." Even, as if breaking my things, taking my savings, stealing my childhood joy was some kind of balancing act. But it wasn't the confession that changed everything. It was my parents' reaction. My mother instantly waved her hand. "Oh, Mike, that was years ago. We're not digging up old mistakes." My father nodded. "Exactly. No point in blaming each other for old drama." Old drama. The words slammed into me like a brick wall. Mike's confession wasn't a turning point for them. It was an inconvenience, a disruption to the narrative they'd built, where I was the difficult daughter, the ungrateful one, the problem. I felt heat crawl up my spine, not shame this time, but clarity. So I said, measured and calm, "This is why you're not invited." My father's face tightened. "Sarah, be reasonable. You're making a mountain out of nothing. I will pay for the entire wedding. Just let us be part of it." Jake stiffened beside me, but I raised a hand gently. It's not about money. It's not about a wedding. It's about the fact that you've never held Mike accountable for anything he's done. Not once. My mother leaned forward, voice trembling. He was insecure. He needed more support. You were older. Why couldn't you understand that? Of course. Of course I had to understand. I always had to understand. Something sharp clicked inside me. You didn't raise me to be a daughter, I said. You raised me to be his cushion. Silence fell like a hammer. Mike swallowed, but said nothing. My father's expression hardened. If you leave now, he warned, don't expect us to welcome you back. I stood. Jake stood with me. And for once, I didn't feel like a fragile girl being pushed out of her family. I felt like a woman walking out of a cage she hadn't realized was unlocked. My mother's voice cracked behind us. Sarah, does this mean we're cut off forever? I turned back to her. I don't know, I said honestly, but I need space to heal, and I need you to let me. And then I walked out. In the days that followed, the fallout intensified, but something was different. I wasn't afraid anymore. Extended relatives attacked me over text. I didn't respond. My parents sent long emotional messages. I deleted them. Mike sent another apology email, this one oddly self-justifying. I read it calmly, then blocked him again. I felt light. Not peaceful, not yet, but unburdened. Jake saw the shift too. One evening, while we watched the sun melt into the horizon at a beach town he whisked me away to for a weekend escape, he squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, he said, for choosing yourself. I leaned my head against his shoulder. I didn't know I could. He kissed my temple. That's why you have me now, to remind you. And then, for the first time in months, maybe years, I breathed deeply enough for my lungs to fill without tightening around old wounds. The turning point wasn't an explosion. It was a quiet realization. I cannot force people to love me well, but I can choose the people who do. And that choice? It was the moment my power began. Weddings have a way of revealing people's true colors, not in the soft, romantic palette of blush and ivory, but in the raw tones of ego, insecurity, and entitlement. For my family, the fallout began long before the wedding day. For me, the consequences were finally landing where they belonged. After the cafe confrontation, I blocked every number connected to my parents and Mike. It felt drastic, it felt harsh, but mostly it felt necessary, like stitching a wound closed before it could get infected again. Jake and I were finally able to breathe. We spent evenings finalizing our vows, arguing playfully over which cake flavor to choose, practicing our first dance in the living room while laughing every time I stepped on his toes. But the peace didn't last long, because when toxic people lose control, they don't let go, they escalate. First wave of fallout. The smear campaign. It began with whispers. My aunt called Jake one evening, not me, Jake. Are you aware, she began in a grave tone, that Sarah is going through a psychological breakdown? Jake nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, what? She continued without hesitation. Her parents said she's been erratic, unstable, shutting everyone out. They're worried for her mental health. Jake stood in the kitchen, hand gripping the counter, eyes flashing to me where I sat on the couch. I mouthed, what? He put the call on speaker. She refuses help, my aunt said. She's pushing away her family, and we're all concerned that you might not know what you're getting into by marrying her. Jake didn't yell. He didn't snap. He said, voice steady and cutting, Sarah's mental health is excellent, and if you think isolating, manipulating, and attacking her is concern, then you're mistaken. My aunt sputtered, taken aback. That's not what I meant. Then don't call again, he said calmly, and hung up. I stared at him, stunned. He shrugged lightly. If they want to lie, they can do it without my participation. The smear campaign didn't stop, though. Relatives began messaging mutual friends. Cousins posted vague, judgmental things on social media. Some people forget where they come from. Family should always come first, unless you've lost your mind. It was humiliating. But more than that, it was clarifying. Because for the first time, the extended family revealed exactly where they stood. Not with truth, not with me. With the narrative my parents fed them. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. And that silence enraged them more than any argument could. Second wave, control through desperation. The next blow came the following week. My mom showed up at my workplace. The emotional blackmail, the photo albums, the public display, the threat of never forgiving me. After security escorted her out, I sat in my car for almost an hour, hands shaking against the steering wheel. It was my lowest point. And yet, deep inside, something hardened. Their desperation wasn't about losing me. It was about losing control of me. That truth stung, but it also freed something in me. Third wave. Mike's last attempt. 2 days later, my venue coordinator called. Someone pretended to be your fiancé and tried to add 3 names to the guest list. Jake took the phone from my hand, furious, but the coordinator reassured us. I knew something felt off. I didn't make any changes. Mike had crossed another line. Not emotional manipulation, not guilt. Identity fraud. Jake sat beside me on the couch afterward, his arm around me, grounding me. We're done trying to manage their behavior, he said. Now we protect ourselves. And we did. We password protected every vendor. We updated our contracts. We hired security for the day of the wedding. I hated that it had come to this. But I loved that Jake faced it with me, not as my shield, but as my partner. The wedding day. The final collapse. The day arrived like a soft sunrise over a trembling horizon. The venue was breathtaking. Soft garden lights, delicate floral arches, rows of chairs filled with the people who had truly loved me, not by obligation, but by choice. I was getting my hair done when my bridesmaid rushed in, eyes wide. Sarah, your family is here. For a moment, everything froze. My heart didn't race. My stomach didn't drop. I simply felt done. Are they making a scene? I asked quietly. She shook her head. No, security's handling it. I walked to the window. Below, I saw them, my mother, father, and Mike, dressed in formal attire, gesturing wildly at the guards. My mom's tears were flowing. My father looked ready to argue with the sky itself. Mike stood stiff, jaw clenched, humiliated. But they couldn't get in. They couldn't touch me. Not anymore. I stepped back from the window. A surprising calm washed over me. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Closure. The domino effect. In the days that followed, the fallout deepened. Relatives who attended the wedding reached out, not to condemn me, but to apologize. I see now why you distanced yourself. Your family showed their true colors. I'm sorry I believed the wrong version. Others stayed silent, embarrassed by their complicity. Mike sent one final email. I'm starting therapy. I saw how serious you were when security turned us away. I'm sorry for everything. I believed the part about therapy. I did not believe the rest. My parents didn't contact me directly again. Humiliation broke something in them. Something prideful, not loving. My aunt told me, they said they'll wait until you come to your senses. But I wasn't planning to, because for the first time in my life, I finally had senses of my own. The deepest fallout of all. The biggest consequence didn't fall on them. It fell on the illusion I'd clung to for years. The illusion that someday, with enough patience or achievement or sacrifice, they would love me the way I needed them to. Watching them be escorted from my wedding shattered that hope once and for all. But in its place, something new grew. Self-respect, self-protection, self-worth. Jake's family embraced me fully. His mother held my hand and whispered, "You're ours now, and we don't let go." And for the first time, I believed her. The fallout didn't destroy me. It freed me. Our honeymoon in Greece felt like stepping into a world that had no memory of pain. Soft white buildings, turquoise water stretching endlessly, the warm scent of sea salt drifting on the wind. Everything felt lighter, brighter, untouched by the chaos we had just escaped. For the first time in months, I slept deeply. I woke without dread. I laughed without forcing it. And Jake looked at me like he could finally exhale too. We walked hand in hand through narrow stone streets, dipped our feet into the Aegean Sea, ate honey-drizzled pastries at sunrise, and danced barefoot on our hotel balcony at midnight. Every moment was quiet, healing, unhurried. One evening, as the sun melted into orange ribbons over the water, Jake wrapped his arms around my waist from behind. "You feel different," he whispered against my shoulder. I leaned back into him. "I feel free." It wasn't freedom from my family. It was freedom from the version of myself they had shaped. The one who doubted her own worth, questioned every boundary, apologized for existing. I wasn't that girl anymore. Coming home was the real test. The moment we landed, reality waited patiently at baggage claim. But something had changed. My chest didn't tighten when I turned on my phone. I no longer checked for missed calls from numbers I feared. My hands stayed steady. The storm that had haunted me for years had finally burned itself out. I wasn't scared of their anger anymore. I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't clinging to hope that they might someday become the parents I needed. I had finally accepted them as they were, and accepted myself as someone worthy of peace. Our apartment felt different too. Warmer, cozier, filled with little remnants of the wedding. My bouquet drying upside down in the hallway, Jake's tie draped over the back of a chair, a stack of wedding gifts waiting to be opened. Life was moving forward, and I was moving with it. In the weeks that followed, I returned to work without fear of my mother appearing in the lobby. Jake and I started premarital counseling, now postmarital, technically, not because we were struggling, but because we wanted to build something strong and intentional. Jake's mother invited me over to bake cookies, and as we rolled dough together, she said, "Sweetheart, families come in many forms. Some we're born into, some we build ourselves." I swallowed hard at that, because for once it didn't sting. It felt true. A few more messages came from extended relatives, small ripples of a storm that was already dying. Some apologized. Some tried to guilt me again. I answered none of them. Mike sent one last email. Short, sincere sounding, filled with phrases like, "I'm working on myself and I want to do better." I didn't hate him. I didn't forgive him. I simply let it be. Because closure doesn't always require reconciliation. Sometimes closure is choosing not to reopen a door. As for my parents, I've heard nothing, and that silence, surprisingly, is peace. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll reconnect years from now, or if our paths will drift forever apart. What I do know is this: I will never again trade my mental health for their comfort. I will never again shrink myself to fit their narrative. I will never again apologize for choosing a life where I am safe, respected, and loved. The lesson I carry now. If you're watching this, if you've lived even a fraction of what I've lived, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family, even if the world says you owe them loyalty, even if they raised you. Love is not owed, respect is not automatic, and being related to someone does not give them permission to break you. Your peace is not selfish, your boundaries are not cruelty, and healing is something you are allowed to choose every single day. My wedding wasn't ruined by who wasn't there. It was saved by who was. My husband, his family, my friends, and the version of me who finally believed she deserved better. For the first time in my life, I feel whole. Not because I gained something, but because I finally let something go.